Okay, right. So we'll go back to the first slide. And I think we can get started. So welcome everyone to our second workshop. This is Intro to Web Development. I am Shardul, the co-lead for workshops and talks, and joining me is Shashank, who is our junior co-lead. We also have Josh, Bilal, Shub, and Dilesh, who will be answering the questions in the chat as well as in the breakout sessions towards the end. So just to give you a brief overview of the agenda today, we'll be learning the basics of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then apply that knowledge to build a personal website. And then finally, we'll deploy that website onto GitHub pages. And then towards the end, if you have any technical trouble or questions, we'll have breakout room sessions with their volunteers, and then they can help you out with that. So if you want to follow along, again, we have all the links in the chat, the slides, the text editor, and all the requirements that you need. So please click on that link if you're not set up. You guys have some time before we get to the personal website demo part. So please make sure that you have that installed. So to give you kind of a sneak peek and some motivation behind today's workshop, I'll let Shashank kind of walk you through some of our websites and show you like some of the stuff that you would be able to do after this workshop. So Shashank, feel free to kind of walk us through the website.
Yeah, for sure. So just taking a look at Shardul's website over here first. So he has more of a resume kind of portfolio website. He has a lot of details about his himself, his experience, and his projects that he's worked on. And you tend to have this kind of website through your years in university where you can showcase exactly what you've done over the past 4 years. So then if we move on to Shub's, for example, Shub has a more minimalistic approach to his website. And when Shardul reloaded the page, you see that Shub has a little CSS animation there. And it's a really like appealing, it provides a wow factor when someone opens up the site to like really dig in and want to look more at his website, look at his resume, look at his contact, LinkedIn, and he also highlights his skills. So if you're focused primarily in the software and computer science industry, it's really important to showcase exactly what you know so that as soon as a recruiter or someone in the technical industry looks at your website, they're able to identify what kind of person you are in less than 30 seconds. So Shub really does that well. Move on to Talesh. Talesh has a very minimalistic look as well. I feel like a lot of websites go for this kind of minimalistic look. He also has some really cool CSS applications. So when Hardul hovers over Talesh, his name, it shows the pronunciation of his name, which is like nowadays, a lot of people really value the pronunciation. And if you guys know how LinkedIn also shows that you can add how to exactly pronounce your name, because nowadays when you're meeting new people, it's really important to keep keep a good respect to everyone and make sure that you're respecting who they are as a person and understanding them. And a quick little Easter egg that Dilesh hid for whoever actually explores this website is when you hover over currently seeking 2021 winter co-op, it changes the cursor into a little loading screen. And all of this can be implemented with basic HTML and CSS. I think, I don't know if Shardul's missing my website, but yeah, you can just click on it. So my website is also very minimalistic. I just put a background of Toronto because that's where I'm from. And it doesn't have too many big details or anything. I just want to showcase my resume, my LinkedIn, my GitHub, and my email ID. So when you hover over the icons, it'll add a little touch of like a blue hint to match my profile picture. And this is ideally what we're going to be making for you guys today as well. By the end of this session, you should be able to achieve exactly what we have here shown.
Okay, thank you, Shashank, for showing those. If that already didn't inspire you, I have some few more reasons why you want to learn and get interested in web development. So the first thing that many of you may already know is that web technologies open up a lot of internship and future career opportunities. So as companies move to kind of remote work and businesses come online, these opportunities will only continue to grow. And knowing these technologies open up opportunities to not only build for the web, but for cross-platform apps. For example, like you can develop for desktop and Android or iOS. So one of the examples is Electron. So that's a framework that many of the desktop apps use For example, Discord, Slack, Visual Studio Code, all of them use web technologies using a framework like Electron. And there's also tons of resources online. So for example, if you have a great idea, you can quickly turn that into reality and deploy for anyone to use, because web is so like easily accessible. And so it's also great for side projects because employers can see tangible results and see exactly what you've created. Many of the students find their first internship based on the web apps that they've created. So before we kind of jump into the details of HTML, CSS, JavaScript, I'd like to know your guys' experience with. Sorry, I think I disconnected my video, but yeah. So I'd like to know your experience with HTML, CSS. So if you are totally new to web development, please press 1 in the chat. And if you kind of know the basic syntax but don't have much experience, please type 2 in the chat. And this will just help me to kind of know whether I should go fast or I should take it slow. Okay, so, all right, I'm seeing a lot of mixed results. So a lot of you are kind of familiar with the basic syntax, and some of you typed 1, so you're totally new. So I'll kind of briefly just like go at medium pace, and for people that like are completely new to it, just so they're not lost for HTML, CSS. So please just bear with me if you are experienced. Well, I won't take more than like 20 minutes. So let's get into it. So what is HTML? So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's not a programming language. So it instead is basically the code that's defining the structure of a web page. So it consists of a series of elements to define the content that shows up on the web page. And these elements describe the web page exactly how to display that content. So this might be a little confusing at first for those of you guys who have never done web development before. So let's look at syntax first. To start off, you start with the opening tag, which are basically angle brackets with letters inside them. So here we have a paragraph element. So this is just like simple text that's going to be displayed on the web page. And P is our keyword that's describing that this is a paragraph element. And then we have our content. So this is what actually gets displayed on the web page. And this is followed by the closing tag. So closing tag essentially tells web page that, okay, this is where my element ends. And so that's just the basic syntax for HTML. As you will see in the demo, you learn more about the syntax in different ways. But essentially, there are 2 types of elements that you really need to know. The first one is nested elements. So you have your paragraph element again here, and then you have your strong element inside it. So essentially what strong element does is it bolds the word query. So here's like that's the basic syntax of nested element. And then you also have your empty elements. So empty elements essentially don't have content associated with them. So as you can notice, they don't need a closing tag for them. So here we have our image, for example, and it's represented by the img keyword, and it doesn't need a closing tag. And to give you more examples, here's our line break. So it starts a new line, and then we have our horizontal line. So it just displays a horizontal line. And so you might notice the image tag. This has a piece of code that's a bit weird, and it's included in the opening tag. So here, src, and this is what it's called an attribute. So attributes are essentially things that contain extra information about the element. They can change the behavior or simply provide metadata to our HTML web page. And as you saw before, the syntax is essentially you put that attribute into the opening tag of your element. And so here you see the name equals the value. That's the basic syntax. And since these attributes go into our opening tag, they don't get displayed onto the web page. So they're not part of the content. Let's see some more examples. So here we have paragraph element again, and class here is our attribute. So class is a type of a global attribute, which means that it can be used with any HTML element. So if you have image, paragraph, you can use class with them. And we'll talk about more about class later. It's essentially used to group things together and style them. But moving on, we have our image tag again. And here you see some specific attributes. So source src, for example, is a attribute that's specific to our image tag. And this is essentially used to show HTML where the actual image is. So here, for example, the image would just be in our root folder, so within our directory, and we specify the image name. And then we also have our alt, which is another attribute that contains descriptive text for when the image is not loaded. So you might have noticed in some websites that fail to load images, they show like a little text for what the image is about. And then lastly, we have our anchor tag. So anchor tags are hyperlink. You can think of them as like the links that you put in, for example, Google Docs. And these represent like links to, for example, external pages or like links to things inside your doc. So those are kind of like the basic HTML syntax, and like that's what you need to know. But there's like common tags that you frequently use. So first off, like I'd like to show heading tag. And this is like, if you were familiar with like headings in Google Docs or Word, essentially is the same thing. And the way you read them as is you use H1 to display like the heading 1, and up to H6 to display like different types of levels of headings. Then moving on, we have our lists. So list represent just like ordered or unordered list. Here, the code that you see is an example of an unordered list. So you start off with the UL. So this would contain, this is telling your web page that, okay, I'm going to start my list off. And then you would nest list items within that UL tag. So as you can see here, I've listed 3 list items. And then this would represent the output would be the unordered list that you see here. And then if you were to replace the UL tag with OL, you would get an ordered list. So moving on, we have our anchor tag. As we talked about earlier, this tag is used to hyperlink things and provide links to web pages. But there's also use cases where you can provide links to your own websites or own web pages. For example, if you have like a different web page containing of all the projects that you've done, you use what's called a relative link. So you don't need to provide like the full URL because you don't know where you're going to host it. So all you need to do is put the file in the root directory and just provide the name of the HTML element or the file. And then you have a link to a section. So you can also provide users the ability to scroll to a section. For example, as you see here, if I was to include a ID attribute to my paragraph about me section, clicking on this link that I provide with the anchor tag would scroll me down to that specific paragraph. And then lastly, we have our protocols. So protocols are special types of links. So for example, if you were to provide your email to someone, you'd specify the link as like so. So using mail to would automatically tell the browser that, okay, the person intends to send an email. So open up their default email application. So if you were to click on contact me, it would open up your mail application. And then lastly, we have our divisions. So divisions are essentially just containers, mostly used for styling and grouping things together. So this would help you in keeping things organized within your HTML file. And you'll see more example of this when we're actually making the our personal website. And so those are the common tags that you really need to know. There's some more specific to some use cases. For example, you have your tables to display content within a table form. You have your input to take in user input. And then you have like other italics or bold and things like that. And you can find like any use case that you want. You can click on that link actually and find HTML tags like video, audio, and there's like, I think there's about like 100 HTML tags. So if there's any specific use case that you're thinking of, you can actually like follow that link and find out if a tag exists. So let's see how you can put all of these tags together in an HTML file. So HTML file starts off with the doc type preamble. And this is telling our browser, okay, basically we need to show HTML content, so parse it like one. And then we start off with our HTML element, so that this is like the root. Everything goes inside this HTML element. And this is followed by our head. So head is where we declare character sets, for example, or we declare the title of the browser tab. And then this would essentially show the title of the browser page. Okay, so next up we have, next up we have our body tag. This is where all the content goes. So whatever you want to display onto your web page, you put it in the body tag. So here I have the example of putting a header tag and a paragraph tag. So if you were to put this in an index.html file, you would see this kind of result. So that's essentially all that you need to know for HTML. And now you can start building like basic looking websites. If you'd like to know more, please follow these resources. I still use these resources as when like if I have to look anything up, because I'm sure like you guys will like probably need to find like specific use case or may want to look up like the exact syntax. So is HTML enough for building websites? Today's modern websites like do need to have styles, and without styles, like you see an example of Google search result here without with the styles removed, and it does not look great. So yes, you need some styling. Just HTML doesn't work. And CSS is what makes these websites visually appealing. So what is CSS? CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and essentially it's a style sheet language. So what that means is it defines styles for our HTML content. And the cascading word here means that the parent elements, styles that we define for parent elements, get passed down to our child elements. So if you remember, we talked about nesting. Here's where that comes into play. So if you have a nested element as a parent, the styles for that get passed down to our child elements. And the way you write CSS is that you define them by using rule sets. And rule sets are nothing but just like blocks of code that exactly describe your rule sets or styles. And then you also have the ability to selectively style any HTML element that you want using CSS. So before we look at the exact syntax of how to write CSS, I'd just like to quickly talk about how CSS actually treats HTML elements. And you can think of HTML elements as basically like boxes sitting on top of each other. So you see the image on the right here. This is how CSS treats all of HTML content. So HTML content has margin, they have a border, they have the padding, so the space between the border and the content, and lastly, you have your content. And CSS allows you to basically style any part of the this box that you want, and you can do that using those rule sets that we talked about earlier. So how do you actually write those rule sets? Well, you start off with the selector, which basically selects the exact HTML elements that you want to style. And they can be either the tag name, the class name, or the ID. Here we're using a tag name since if you remember, P is our tag name for our paragraph element. And then we're saying the property. So the styling property is the color here. We're setting it to red. So that's property value. And so what this does, this rule set does, is it styles all of the paragraph in my HTML file as red. So here you can see an example. My paragraph was, the text was my first paragraph. Now it appears in red. So that's how you style a bunch of like tags together. But then how do you style elements selectively? So here's the first example. So the attribute class, if you were to group elements together and define them a single class, you would write your syntax essentially starting with a dot. So dot nodes would represent all of the elements that have the attribute class equals nodes. And so this is useful for if you have like groups of elements that represent the same meaning, like for nodes example, then you would have the attribute class attached to them. And then if you were to style like individual elements, you can also use the attribute ID. And for ID, the syntax changes a little bit. You start off with the hashtag and then followed by the ID name. And so that's how you select specific unique ID'd elements. So where does the CSS actually go? So CSS can either stay within your HTML file, and if you have it within the HTML file, it has to go under the style element. So this is the way of telling browser, okay, this is my CSS code. Don't treat it like HTML. This is not like a nested element. Whatever is going to be inside the style tag is my CSS rule sets. And so this is how you would write CSS inside your actual HTML file. But then you can also include it if you want to keep things organized. You can include it in a separate file. So here, for example, I would have a CSS file named style, and then I would just use the link attribute or the link HTML element and provide the attribute called href to specify what name I'm using for my style sheet. And then here you have some extra attributes that say what type of file that I'm linking for. And you can see an example of this when Shashank kind of walks you through the personal website. But so CSS, writing CSS is kind of tedious, I'll be honest. It gets really annoying when you have to write like CSS for the whole web page. So there are like a lot of frameworks that help you with this. Bootstrap is a popular one. So here you can see an example of this. So if you were just to specify the class and set it equal to card, it would essentially take all the predefined styles for that CSS component and make those appear within your actual HTML element that you're using. So here you can see an example of that. And then so CSS, like that's essentially all you need to know. There's rule sets. You can have frameworks to simplify your work. And so we have some more resources that will be helpful for you. I know professional developers, even in the workforce, like still look up CSS because it's really annoying, some of the things that are weird with CSS, like layout. And so like make sure that you keep these resources bookmarked because you'll definitely need those. So moving on, we'll talk about JavaScript really quickly. And JavaScript, if you don't know, is what brings your website alive. So they do that by providing a dynamic programming language. So it's not strictly typed, and which means that you don't have to define like types for your variables. You can create new variables and destroy or remove variables without worrying about like memory or like types. And that's why it's a dynamic programming language. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to create a interactivity with the HTML content that you write using what's called a document object model, which is DOM for short. So what is DOM? DOM, you can think of DOM as essentially a tree-like structure that is used to represent the HTML content in your web page. And you don't need to like know all the specifics behind this because it's not really useful when actually you're making a website, but it's good to kind of know the background of it. And so DOM is what actually enables those interactions with your users by allowing you to call specific functions that you can use to manipulate the HTML content. And so we'll see an example of that really quickly. So we have, what I'm trying to do here is whenever the user presses on the click me button, I want to change the header element from hello world to hello everyone. So the way we do that is I'm going to show you an example of including a JavaScript script within your HTML file. So here I fetch the button HTML element, and the way I do that is called the document. So this is my access to the DOM, right? The document variable provides functions to access like HTML elements. So here you can see I called the get element by ID. And this essentially tells the DOM that, okay, I want to fetch the button because it has the ID called update. So it would fetch me the button. And what I want to do now is to listen to the HTML events that the user does. So I call the function add event listener. And this sets up a listener for us for the argument that we provide in the first argument. So click basically tells the browser, okay, this element should listen for user clicks. So the button would listen for user clicks. And when a click is registered, it would call this update header function, which I've defined down here. And what I'm doing here is essentially I'm fetching the header. So my heading, I do the same syntax that I've done up here, and I get the HTML element, and then I change the inner HTML. So inner HTML is essentially your content for the HTML. So whatever's inside it, you can change it by using equals to and then hello everyone. So this would essentially achieve what you see on the right here. So this is the basis. So that was the basis of JavaScript. You can do a lot more interesting things with it. For example, you see here someone's made a little game, and this is using the same concepts as we saw before. So if you're interested in seeing like the code, I have put a link down here in the slides. So feel free to check those out. And so that would be it for JavaScript. I don't want to go into too much detail because honestly, like it requires a full workshop, and we probably would do one if you guys are interested. But for the scope of this workshop, we'll just end it there. And without a further ado, let's get to creating your first personal website. So I'll pass it over to Shashank to kind of walk you through that step. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Shardul. So now we can actually get started with making our personal websites. And Shardul went over a lot of the useful HTML, CSS tags that we'll actually be we'll be using for our own websites now. I think I just saw someone ask to access the slides and someone sent it in the chat. So you can click on those links. Shardul also attached a couple of editors and requirements that are required right before we get started on the personal website. So the editor I'm going to be using is brackets.io. Feel free to use anything that you like. You can also, you also need a GitHub account, and you can also feel free to download GitHub Desktop because we're really not going to use the command line or command prompt to push our code to GitHub. We're just going to use the GitHub Desktop application because it's much simpler, and we want to keep it pretty short today. So with that, I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Should be able to see it.
Yep.
So right away, I'm just going to open up our editor. Oh, before we get started with the actual editor, I went ahead and created a folder on my desktop. I just named it personal website. And I have my background image that I have labeled background and my profile image that I've labeled profile. I also went ahead and put some potential background images that you guys might like that you can download right now. I'm going to share a link to that drive file quickly. Yeah, so there's 5 background images. There's these 5 on that drive. So since we're all McMaster students, you can use this one. I'm actually going to be using this one for the website. There's also other options like a fall image or many other options that whatever you're interested in, you can just pick it up and download that and save it in a folder. So with that, we can get started now. So I'm going to open up brackets. Like we mentioned earlier, we're going to be aiming to do something like this website, where it's just a background image with a rectangle and some small details that you can add, and as well as 4 icons that take you to different links, which is pretty simple, and I think we can get it done in the remainder of the time. So let's get started. So as soon as you just type yes in the chat if you guys have your IDE open, just so I know everyone's ready. Yes or a 1. Cool, looks like everyone's ready. All right, so if you're using brackets, you can just head over to File, New. And before we get started with writing anything, we're gonna save our HTML file in the same directory as our personal website folder. So we're gonna call this index.html. And this is really key that you name it specifically index.html, because with any web dev project, you're gonna wanna have it named this specific file because the home page is always gonna be the index page. We're also gonna go ahead and create another file for our CSS. And with brackets, it's really useful because you can actually split the screen into 2. So while you work on your HTML, you can work on your CSS. You can do that by heading over to View and click on Vertical Split. You can also put a horizontal split if you prefer that. But as I was saying, we're going to create a new file here. We're going to save this as profile style.css. So we have our HTML file here and we have our CSS file here. So right before you get started, the most important thing that every HTML or website will have in their HTML code is a starting tag, which denotes that it's a website or HTML code. So you're gonna have open bracket, exclamation mark, doc type, HTML. Every website will start off with this tag, and it's very crucial to web dev. Right after that, we're gonna also have an HTML tag to specify the language that we're gonna be using. Another cool thing about brackets is once you have your initial tag, to make sure that you're not forgetting tags, because it can get pretty messy with more intermediate and advanced websites, it's going to actually put the closing tag immediately after the starting tag. So just keep an eye out for that. I'm sure VS Code as well as Atom does that as well, but I'm not sure about Sublime because I don't use that as often. You have HTML, and there's two key components in the HTML skeleton. So the first component is going to be the head tag. So the head tag is primarily used to specify details that the user won't really see too much. So one of the first details is going to be the title. So we're going to have a title tag here. Title, and we're just going to name it, just going to put my name here. So the reason I put this as my name, the title tag is basically, if we head over here, what shows up on the Chrome tab or the Firefox tab or whatever browser that you're using, at the top of the tab, there'll be a title that displays whatever the website is showing. So if we're making a personal website, we want it to be our own name in this case. Also, guys, just a quick note, if I'm going too fast or going too slow, please let me know and I can slow down my pace. So once we have our title tag, we can move on to a couple other stuff. So like Shardul had mentioned previously, Bootstrap is very useful to make your website more user-friendly, and it's also really useful in skipping a lot of the CSS steps that get really tedious. So right away, you're gonna want to import those Bootstrap elements in the head itself. So right after this, we're just gonna have link relation style sheet. So this link relation style sheet is we're just creating a tag to specify that we're importing CSS elements into the HTML script. Also, don't forget the quotation marks around. Then we're going to have a type tag or a type, and it's going to provide text slash CSS. And we're going to have an href tag. And href tags are very useful in CSS because hrefs basically point towards what you're importing. So for in this case, href, we're going to be importing our profile style file over. So make sure you keep the same syntax. I have it named profile style.css. So now whatever CSS elements that we put in here is going to reach the HTML when we run the HTML file. We're also going to have another link, well, equal style sheet. And this one's type is also going to be CSS. Now this is for the Bootstrap element. So I'll take a quick minute to go a little bit more in depth with Bootstrap elements because it's something that makes your life very simple. So I'm going to copy paste the same Bootstrap link in the chat just so everyone has access to it. So basically, this Bootstrap link I have here is for the fonts I'm using as well as the icons that I'm using. So if we head over to Google real quick, I have something called Font Awesome, as you can see at the end of that link. So let's just Google Font Awesome here. So Font Awesome is a really cool kit where you can get access to over 700 icons, or I think now they've expanded their series and they have over 1,500 free icons that you can use. And it has tons of icons. So for example, we're going to use a PDF icon for our resume. So we're just going to search PDF. And you have these 12 different ones. You can see here, some are pro and some are free. Like this one is free, but this one is pro, like the grayed out options. So I'd suggest just going with the free one. It's pretty simple. Once you have an icon selected, it'll show up over here. and we're going to go in more depth about how to actually import this without actually having to save it. So like I said, I sent that link in the chat. Make sure you copy that over to your href tag over here. So this link is called the CDN path. The CDN path is basically a bunch of text full of CSS code and everything. You won't really have time to really look over it. You can literally just, if you have anything, you can just search up font awesome CDN, or I completely mistyped CDN. And you're going to get links to where the CDN script over here. So for example, for Font Awesome, for the 5.10 version, the CDN's right here. So really keep that in mind. So the CDN version that I'm using is Font Awesome 4.7.0. So all of the fonts that I'm using are going to be from Font Awesome 4.7.0. So if I just head over to 4.7 version over here, yeah, so this one only has about 750 icons. This is from 2017. I haven't really changed my icons since when I first created my website back then. So it's been pretty convenient that not many new fonts are required in a website, because I like the fonts that I have right now. I haven't really had a need to change them. But if you are interested in using the most recent version, which is 5.15, I believe, we're just gonna go Font Awesome 5.15 CDN. This first link here has all the CDN links. So if you're using an icon from the 5.15 version, you'd want to copy one of these instead. But to keep it simple, for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to just use the 4.7 version. All right, with that, let's head over back to the code. We're going to want to close this link up after we've opened it. So I see someone say the URL turned red. Yeah, so you just want to close the tag after it. It turns red because the ID is telling you that you're missing one of the close brackets. Another link that I'm using for one of my icons is another CDN link with icon pack called IcoMoon. So I can type that in the chat if someone wants to look into that. So basically, I got these icon packs by just going to Google and searching up free website icon packs, and I searched up their CDN value or CDN text, and there'll be tons and tons of resources. Some are most likely going to be paid, but you can find really good free ones. And I really suggest using the free ones because it's a very simple website, so you don't really need to pay anything big. So for my IcoMoon one, I'm sending the link in the chat real quick. That's the CDN. Just gonna paste that here as well. So this is my Font Awesome CDN, and this is my IcoMoon CDN. Finally, we're also gonna wanna import our fonts, because when you first create your website in HTML, you're gonna get the basic Times New Roman font. And personally, the Times New Roman font is pretty ugly. So I'd suggest looking into getting a more pretty font that people would actually like to see. So for this, you don't really, you need a style sheet. So at the start, just mention the style sheet, but you don't need to specify a type. You can just head over to the href tag instead. So for fonts, I highly, highly suggest just going to fonts.google.com. They have tons and tons of fonts here. You really can't go through each one, but I'd say browse through some fonts, find ones that you like. Maybe you already have a font that you prefer. You can probably just search that up. For the sake of this tutorial, we're going to be using Carla. I really like this. It provides a really minimalistic look to your website. So if you're interested in that kind of feel and look, I'd suggest Carla. Other good ones are like Roboto, and there's tons and tons of ones. I'm sure you'll find something that you like on this website. So it's very simple to actually import fonts from Google. They make it very developer friendly. So while you're on your index file, I'm going to send a quick link for this as well when you want to import it. So when I'm importing Carla, it would just be this link that I sent in the chat over there. So if you have another font in mind that you want to use rather than Carla, all you have to do is delete this Carla part and change it to another font that you like, for example, Voto. That's the only difference in the link. Everything else stays the same. So I'm gonna head back and put the one I like over this, and then I can just close this tag up. So with that, we've specified all the imports that we're going to be making into our website. So just to reiterate, we're going to be importing our CSS file from here. We're going to have our Bootstrap fonts, this one and this one, as well as our actual text font, which is from Google. Now we can actually get to the body of our website. So like I mentioned before, in the skeleton, you're going to have two parts. You're going to have the head and you're going to have the body. So body of the website is where all of our actual content is stored in. So we're going to have our body tag. We're going to have our first division. Like Shardul mentioned, division helps you in sorting out your code to make sure it's more friendly to read. So we're going to have a division tag. And we're also going to go ahead and specify a class. So I'm going to specify this class to be the background image, so that when we make changes to our CSS script, CSS styling for background, I can just call this class here and it'll make the changes for anything that's contained inside this division. So once we have that, we're going to head over inside that division. We're going to write another division. We're going to go to class, and this is going to be our profile. So for now, don't worry about what these classes really mean. I will explain them as I open up a live preview of the website once we actually have some text. So now we're going to bring our first element actually onto our website, and that's going to be our profile image. So hopefully you guys have something handy. Let me know if I'm going too fast paced. I can slow it down and wait for you guys to get something. So in our working directory, I already have my profile image here. So this is what I'm going to be using. So the name of the file is called profile.jpg. Once you have profile.jpg, yeah, someone asked me to slow down. Do you want me to go back a few steps, or is this good? Like, do you want me to just pause for a minute or two? Yeah, there's going to be a recording of the session as well. It's being recorded right now. At the end of the session, we'll post a link to it. Okay, we're almost saying to pause for a second. No worries. I'll just reiterate the stuff that I did previously. So hopefully you guys got all of this copied over. So again, with the body tag, we have a body tag here to specify what exactly is going on to our website. We have a division class background image. So with the class, we're just specifying the details that would be posted inside the background image. We have another class here for profile. So profile is going to be, if I just head over to the sample website that we have here. So background image, then the profile is going to be everything contained in this black rectangular box. And then we have an image. So the image is going to be whatever the profile image that we're going to be uploading. So for example, I chose this image. So hopefully you guys are caught up now. If not, again, a recording is going to be posted, so everything will be available. And we're also going to be here an extra 20 to 30 minutes to help you guys with anything after the presentation. So let's move on then. So we have division class equal profile text. So this is for the actual text that we're going to be having on our website. So in the example case, it's all of this material right here. So if you look here from Shardul's presentation that we had before, this is an H2 tag because you can notice that it's much bigger than the subheadings, and these are actually paragraph tags instead of heading tags. So you might be thinking like, why should you really specify if they're just a difference in size? So it makes it much simpler if you specify exactly what the tags are, so that when you're writing it in CSS, you're able to call a whole tag rather than putting a class to each and every single text like whatever text that you're putting in. So with that, let's put our first text in. So like I mentioned, an h2 tag for name. I'm going to have a paragraph tag. So I just put McMaster, or I'm just going to put whatever I have already. University, electrical engineering co-op. It's a cool little tip for you guys. It's good to mention if you are in a registered co-op program, because a lot of employers actually look at that small detail, because it's something that they want to keep a track record of. So if you are in a co-op program, be sure to mention that on the home page of your website. We're going to put another paragraph tag that just says if you're looking for winter placements or summer placements, currently seeking 2021 summer internships. So I think that this is a good place to stop and just look at what we have so far on our website. So another cool thing, which why I suggested to have brackets as your IDE, if you see this little bolt icon on the top right, you just press that. Takes a minute, but it opens up a live preview of what exactly you're coding at the moment. So far, we have our profile image, we have the h2 tag, and we have our 2 paragraph tags as well. So now with this screen, because I have my HTML and CSS open, I'm not really going to keep this open. I can just close it. But keep in mind that with brackets, you can actually have your HTML open here while you're making your edits. It's a live preview. So as you make your edits, it's actually going to show that on the website, which is a really cool thing that I haven't seen a lot of other IDEs like VS Code or Sublime really implement. So now that we have our text uploaded and we have our image uploaded, we're going to be going to our icons that we talked about from Bootstrap. So it does get a little bit more technical and you're going to see a lot of wording, but I'm going to go in depth on exactly what I'm uploading. So we're going to have another division. So this division, could you go back to your website folder where your images are stored? Yeah, so this would be my website folder. Do you have a specific question about the website folder? Also, I'm not sure, Shardul, is it like, can they unmute and ask questions as well?
Yeah, you should be able to unmute, guys, if you
Yeah.
have specific questions.
Yeah, so if you guys are uncomfortable, then you can just add. Do we need to store background images in the same folder as you've done? No, so this background images is just images that are compiled. You don't really need these images. You just need to pick up one of these. So for example, I picked up this, and I picked up this picture and put it in the actual directory where the index file is. So I just have this background image here of McMaster. Just make sure it's named background because my tutorial will specify that as we go further. But you don't really need this folder with all 5 images. You just need one of the images and name that image background. The only key thing is make sure it's in the same folder as the index and the profile style. Cool. So heading back to our code again, we're going to our icons now. So we have div class equals profile fonts. Now notice that I didn't really put this division class inside nested as we were doing here, only because you want to keep the fonts separate. Since it's Bootstrap elements, it can get really messy with the code that they provide. So you want to keep that separate from the code that you're putting in. And it would also make it easier when we go to the CSS to call by profile fonts and profile text. So keeping it organized like this ensures that you're not going to have any problems later on when you revisit your website to make changes. Because I update my website very rarely, maybe only once in a year when I want to change which internship I'm looking for. or if I want to make a change to my resume or LinkedIn or anything like that. So moving on, we're going to have our first icon, which is going to be the resume icon. So we're going to have an anchor tag. Like Shardul mentioned, an anchor tag is used to make something clickable. So an icon or a button. We're going to have another href tag, which points to where we're going. And in that folder, I'm going to be putting my resume in. So if you have your resume handy as well, I suggest you put that into the same folder here with the personal website. Another neat trick I'm going to show you is target equals underscore blank. So let me explain this tag here. So this tag is very, very important in web dev. A lot of sites actually implement it. So what target underscore blank does is, I can show it best with an example here. So if you have your icons here and you click on the icon, when you have target underscore blank, it ensures that you open the website on a separate tab rather than opening it up on this tab. So for example, when you have on like Google searches, so I'm just going to do a test search. So when you do test, when you click on this, their HTML tag for that doesn't have underscore blank. It opens up on the same tab. So it's very useful to have a target underscore blank when people are viewing your website and you have multiple icons to click. So for example, if people wanted to click all 4 of your tags, they can click your resume, their LinkedIn, GitHub, and the mail, and it would open up on 4 separate tabs or 3 separate tabs specifically. It's something very useful that a lot of people who are taking a quick look at your website, for example, recruiters, they'll just look at your website for maybe a minute or two. So something like that small kind of detail will make a huge difference in their time as well. So highly suggest having that target underscore blank in your thing. So once we have that, we're going to close this tag and it automatically puts the end anchor over there. Now with Bootstrap elements, I want to head back to Font Awesome's website again. Awesome. 2.0. So can't really see the search. Maybe we'll just do it on the newest one. I'm going to be providing the code to the icons that I'm using, but let's just say again, we wanted the PDF icon. And for example, I like this very minimalistic look here. So they actually provide you with the HTML code that you should be inputting in your code. So it's this I tag here with the class and everything provided. So you can just click this and it will copy that. But since I'm not using 5.15, I'm using 4.7. I'm going to quickly attach the HTML tag for the icon that I'm using. So I just sent the little code snippet over there in the chat. So we're just going to want to copy that little snippet in between the anchor tag. So over here, we're going to paste that here. And so we have our first icon on our website. So let's just take a look at that. Oops. We'll notice a change. Make sure to save your file and then click on the bolt. I think it's just taking a while to connect. There we go. It takes some time, which is fine. It's probably just unable to load live image from image. Okay. Let's try one more time. If not, we'll just move on and take a look at it at the end. Might have to restart brackets. Okay, it's giving live preview errors. Why don't I close this? I'm just gonna open it back up again. bracket. There we go. So I just closed up my brackets and opened it. So as you can see here, we had all of our text and pictures before, but now we have our first icon as well. So when you first put your icon in, it's going to be blue and look very ugly and stuff. But again, the CSS, it's what makes the website pretty. So we'll get to that soon. Just give me a second. I'm just going to have to open up something else. Keeps opening up the wrong. Just give me a second. I'll open folder. There we go. And then this piece. All right. So once we have this, this is just my one I'm using to teach as well. Anyways, let's just move on from here with this. So we're going to add our next icon, which is going to be a LinkedIn icon. So we're going to have href equals, and then we're just going to have our link our LinkedIn to this. So for example, my LinkedIn, I have it right here. It's going to be this. We're just going to take this and put it in here. So href is where you put your links in, as well as we saw here. So the path to my LinkedIn profile is this right here. We're going to add another target equals underscore blank again, because we want to open it on a new page. And then put the close bracket and put the close anchor as well. And then I have my LinkedIn icon right here. I can paste it if you guys are interested in using the same one. Just give me a second. Just take your time to get caught up in the meantime. Just want to open something else. Okay, just got it. All right, cool. So we have our LinkedIn as well. The reason I'm having this little thing is because I forgot to put the close one. There we go. So now all the reds are gone. So we have our LinkedIn. Another key thing, if you're interested in software and CS industry, is to have your GitHub. It's very helpful to have it on. So again, just head over to your GitHub and copy your profile from your GitHub, the link to your profile, paste that in there. We're gonna have another target equals, and then underscore blank. I'm gonna close that up, and then I have another GitHub icon. You can send that right there. We're gonna paste that in between the anchors. And then finally, a mail to one. So let's talk about the mail to one here. Have anchor href equals, and then quotation marks. So the cool thing about mail to is you can actually force the website to open up the user's mail application that they have downloaded. So for example, on MacBooks, it would be the mail app. And then on Windows, it will be the mail app with whatever is connected on their folder, on their email application as well. So to do that, you're gonna have mail to colon. And when you have this little tag, it forces the website to open the mail application, like I said. And then whichever email ID you want them to send the email to. So that's my email ID. Let me show a quick example of how that would work. I'm just gonna go here, go here. So if I click this mail icon, it opens up my email ID. It puts my from email and to whichever email that they've coded programmed it to, and you can just write your message and it's ready to be sent immediately, which is a really cool thing when you want to contact people. And then I'm gonna put the close tag for this. It puts the anchor, and I have the icon for a little envelope that I'll link in the chat. So with that, we have everything that our HTML is going to have right there. Oops, click this, but that's everything that we have. So let's just do a quick live preview once again. Our profile picture, we have our name, we have the McMaster University, whatever internships you're looking for, as well as our 4 icons that we've decided to put. So we have all our HTML done. So now to go into the more tedious part, for lack of better words, I'll say, uh, it's very difficult to really do the CSS part because there's so many different ways that you can implement CSS that it comes to personal preference. So I have a way that I already implemented before. So I'm just going to be copy pasting most of those stuff. Again, all of this code will be linked after this presentation as well as the recording. So don't worry if you can't copy it all down right away. We just wanted you guys to get introduced to HTML. The CSS gets really tricky. So I'm just going to be copy pasting this part. And like Shardul mentioned before, for the CSS, W3 Schools is one of your best friends. I just saw someone say that to leave the session. Yeah, it's okay. Don't worry. Everything's gonna be posted, so everything's gonna be available. Thank you for coming out, by the way. But yeah, so for CSS, W3 Schools is one of the most useful resources. When I first programmed my website 2 years or 3 years ago, I used W3 Schools and all my elements were taken out of there. And with CSS, it's so powerful that you can do stuff like the example website we showed earlier with Shubs or Talacious, where they added those little Easter eggs on the website that really promotes the appeal factor of the website. So my first CSS element is just our CSS attributes are star, padding, and margin 0. So what this little snippet of code does is it sets, when you have star here, it sets everything you have on the website to have a padding of 0. So remember the box image that Shardul presented, it sets the padding to 0 and it sets the margins of everything to 0. So we're basically creating a blank profile. Now our first class here was background image, or I just shortened it into back image. So I'll write this one out for the first one. We're gonna put a period, back image, curly brackets, and all of our attributes that we want to specify will go in here. So I have stuff ready that I'm just gonna paste here. This is one of the biggest ones. So everything, all the other attributes that follow this one will be the smallest. The background image, since there's so many modifications that need to be made, it's usually going to be the longest one. So the width is set to 100%. So when you set the width to 100%, you're basically making sure that that background image spans from left to right. Now the height is specified to 100 VH. So the height, personally, I mean, it comes down. So my personal monitor uses specific dimensions. VH is just another way of specifying your size. So with CSS, there's 3 different methods you can specify size, 4 different actually. So you have VH, you have EM. So EM is equal to 16 pixels. You have pixels, and you have percentages. So these are, I just wanted to showcase 2 different methods on how you can display your size. So you can either use the percentage or this VH value. 100 VH, just make sure that it reaches from top to bottom of the page. Then you want to specify what image you're using. So you put background image, URL, and you're going to change this to whatever you saved your background image as. So I saved it as background.jpg. So background.jpg. It will show up right there. Click on it, and you have it set up. Background size, cover. So with cover, you're just going to span that page from left to right. With flex, it's also doing the same thing. It's going to flex the image, or in terms of, it would just basically stretch out the image to cover all corners of the web page. Align item center. This centers the background on the screen. And then justify content center does the same thing, except whatever content you put on top of it, it's going to center all of those items as well. Then we have text align center. So all this text that we input on top of the background is going to be centered, as well as I've set the color of the text to be white. So because our background is a more bright background that we have here, I'm going to actually change the background of, I'm going to change the color of our text and make it black instead. So you want to pick color contrast that really make your website more appealing to the eye. Having a very white background or very bright background with a white text would really take away from what you have on your website. So our next class we have is profile. So again, you'd want to have it as dot profile. So you specify the width. So the profile, if I just go to the example here, not this is just a live preview updating itself. The profile is this rectangle on top of the background itself. So for the profile, we have specified the width to be 750 pixels. You can play around with this number and change the number around. And then the background color of that rectangle itself, since we have a more bright background, you want to contrast that, like I said. So I'd like it to be a more white background. So previously, you just have to search up the RGB value for white or whatever background color you're interested in. Previously, this little rectangle here would have been black, but now we're making it white. Head over here, I'm gonna say both. So once we're done with the profile, now we're gonna work around with our profile image that we uploaded. So for that, we can call the anchor itself, the HTML tag itself. The reason we can do that here is because we don't have multiple images. You just have one profile picture. But if you wanted to showcase, for example, your projects, you'd want to do image source equals project one, but also put an ID to it or put an elemental tag to it so that if people want to specify the size of a specific project picture, they can call the ID rather than the entire HTML tag. So if I had multiple images here, whatever changes you make in the CSS here will be made to every single image tag from the HTML. So the height of the image is just 200 pixels. The border radius is 50%. So basically what this does is, let me just bring this onto the screen. So when you have the border radius to be 50%, every time you change the percentage, so for example, let's go to 10%, it's going to round the edges further. So we can go in tens. So 20% will make it a little more round, 30, 40, and then 50 will just make it into circle. Any value greater than 50 will do nothing to it because you've already reduced the corners of the picture to the maximum possible capacity. The margin bottom is you're just adding a margin between the text and the image that you have above here. Let's just minimize this, expand this. Now we're going to be moving to our name, so our H2 tag right here. So you can specify it in this method where you have your class profile text dot profile text, and under your class you have an H2 tag. So we're going to be specifying H2 here. So like I previously mentioned, there's different ways to talk about sizing of fonts or images or anything. We can use the EM size here. So an EM is equal to 16 pixels. So 2.5 EM is equal to 40 pixels in this case. The font weight is the thickness of the font. I've just set it to 550 because I feel like it makes the text stand out more than the other text, which is a subheading. And I've added a little margin to the bottom of the text, just so you have some separation between my name as well as my subheading. The next one, similar to how we did this, we're going to have profile text along with paragraph. So both these paragraph tags, whatever change you make in here is going to be done to both of them. So you have the font size as 1.3 EM, so it's 1.3 times 16 pixels. Font weight is slightly less thick than the 550. Even though it's only 50 less, it still makes a good amount of difference. And you have a 15 pixel margin between this text and all of these fonts that we have here. Finally, we're going to be going to our icons, and this is our second last CSS import. So I've set all the icons to be white. Maybe because we have a white background, we can change this to be black instead and match the text. And between each of the icons, you can specify which direction you want the padding to be. So rather than having padding general here, we can have padding left to be 15 pixels, padding right to be 15 pixels, and then padding top to be 10 pixels. So you can specify exactly how much. So that's why, like with web dev, it gets tedious with these steps where you get to really like specify exactly what you want. We've defined the opacity of the icon to be 5, so we're making it slightly dark, but not so much that it overpowers all of the other content on the page. And we've added a little transition. This transition is to basically help with not this one. Is to basically help as you hover over it, it makes it into blue. So I basically just color graded my profile image and picked up the same color RGB values and put it in here. So as you hover over, it transitions to that color in 0.3 seconds. That's all that means. And to do that hover and set the value, you'd want to call the HTML tag I:hover. And you can set up your color here to whatever one. Like I color graded to my blue profile picture. So you can just use any online color grading tool to find the exact RGB value for your profile image. And then I set the opacity to 1. So it makes it slightly lighter compared to the very bold icons from here. So with that, we actually have our website done. So this would be how our web's final product looks like. So we put our background image, we have our little rectangle here, and we have the Carla font that we used. We imported the profile image, we made it into a circle. We uploaded the different fonts, and as you hover over them, it changes into a similar color as the blue. And with that, we're ready to push this onto our website. I know I started to go a little faster in speed, but it's just so we can move on because I think we've gone a little over time right now. So we're gonna open up GitHub Desktop. And we're also gonna open up our GitHub. So I'm just gonna sign in on mine. And I just created a random one for today's demo. And we're gonna go ahead and click create repository. When you create repository, you wanna name the repository first. So in terms of name, you wanna name it as whatever your GitHub username ID is. So for this account, I named this person as Josh Rayner. So it's gonna be Josh Rayner.github.io. So with your creation of your GitHub account, you're allowed to have one web page that's free, but every following web page after this is going to be paid and you need a pro license. So with your free GitHub page, you're allowed to make that as your personal page. So you just have Josh Rayner, your username ID, .github.io. And you're also allowed to have one web page for another project after this. So if you want to use that GitHub ID for another project, it would basically be Josh Rayner github.io/whatever name you're putting in. So this is going to be a public project. You can't really make it private. You don't really need a README file unless you want to put notes about whatever changes you're making, and you don't need to check off any of this. So we're done with that, and we can just create a repository. Once we've created the repository, all we need to do is set it up in desktop. So we're going to click setup in desktop over here, open GitHub desktop, and it automatically creates a repository in your documents file. So it should give you a bunch of steps. Because I'm not using GitHub desktop for the first time, it doesn't give those steps, but they're pretty easy steps to follow. It will set up a folder in your documents folder. So I just set up here, documents, GitHub, and then the same folder that you have here, it sets it up here. So if you click on here, I have all this stuff here before. So we're just gonna delete that, and we have all these details here. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna open up the folder with our details here. These are all of the stuff that we used for our website. We're just gonna take these stuff and move it into this folder. So it's gonna copy over, just this one's not needed. We have the 4 major stuff that we used. So our website is at our GitHub desktop. The application actually automatically detects changes made to the folder that was cloned or downloaded onto your desktop. So you're just going to put a summary, initial commit. It's ready to be published. It's going to publish it real quick. You just click on this button to publish. And that's it. Once it shows create a pull request again, that means it's uploaded onto GitHub. So I'm going to go back here, reload this. And we have our 4 files here. So a neat little trick here, there's this yellow icon. It's basically building the page because it detects the HTML and the CSS file. So let it take its time to finish using the page and complete building the page so that you can actually click on the link. There, it's done. So if we head over to the settings tab here, we're going to scroll down a little bit. We're going to hit GitHub Pages. So it will say with a check mark, your site is published at joshtrainer.github.io. So it's a username.github.io. If you click on this link, now it's available online. And so anyone that ever wants to go on your link, they would just put your username.github.io and the web page would be available. And with that, we're done with our making our website. And I think Shardul is going to take over for the remainder of this presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Shashank, for showing that. If you guys have questions, we'll actually go ahead and split off into breakout rooms. And I know we are a little bit over time. We're supposed to end at 7, but we are 18 minutes over that. But we'll quickly just go into breakout rooms. The mentors there will help you with any problems that you have. If you don't have any issues, feel free to leave the session. We'll end it there. If not, we'll just hang out in the breakout sessions. If you have any questions, feel free to drop by. So you should be getting an invite soon to join one.